Hello and welcome. This is another Confessions podcast. Yes, a download of sins. That's what's happening here. The Radio 2 audience, my word, what are they up to? This week's Concise Collection features a cheeky childminder, a double bill of bawdy brass bands, and a cowardly construction worker. It's sort of like the definition of a gentleman is someone who uses a butter. Would you use a butter knife if you're on your own, if there's no one else?
Yes, I do. I use it because it's the best thing to transfer butter from the butter dish onto the cracker.
Can you put it in the dishwasher?
No, because I wash my own cutlery. Because I am a gentleman washing my butter knife and my butter dish.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Yes.
Anyway, 16 minutes to 6, the Confessions music is up and running, and it's Lucy who sends in tonight's tale. Lucy, thank you, and apologies, we got a little bit distracted there by butter knives. Who'd have thought? Dear Father Simon and the purveyors of papal pardoning, I am a long-time listener to your show and always enjoy listening to the confession segment, little thinking I would end up sending one of my own. But a confession from a babysitter about lying to her charge brought a memory to mind and I've had to finally beg forgiveness for. About 16 years ago, when I was a youthful teenager trying to earn some extra cash, I took on the babysitting duties for the 10-year-old daughter of a local couple. I'd babysat for others many times before, so another was not going to be an issue. Or so I thought. The problem arose when I realised that the daughter in question, let's call her Molly, was hideous. If they were doing auditions for a devil child in a horror movie, she'd have won easily. When she smiled, it chilled the blood. She had ice fingers. Her teeth were too pointy. She had the eyes of an old witch. You know what it's... Anyway, it's worth it for the money. Anyway, she was one of those know-it-all children who like to find your weakness and then point it out. My weakness was, at that point, my current lack of a boyfriend, which she thought hysterically funny, and pointed this out to me every week. No boyfriend, then, she'd say.
Oh, that's the voice we're going to use, is it?
Well...
right, okay.
What voice do you...
see how this is going.
She's a devil child.
No boyfriend, then, even though I'm 4.
She's 10. Anyway, be quiet, butterboy over there. My mum says you're on the shelf, she says. And then one day, Lucy, what's a spinster? Anyway, this was the last straw. After nearly a month of this, I couldn't take it anymore, and this is where my confession really begins. At the time, a certain Michael Owen was hot property on the football field. Update us, Matt.
Yes, Michael Owen used to play for Liverpool, Manchester United.
And a hot property?
Very much hot property. Used to play for England.
Anyway, says Lucy, every girl with a pulse fancied him, and I was no exception. And after some quite frankly ridiculous thinking, I decided I needed to get back at my devilish charge by inventing a boyfriend. Step forward, Mr. Owen. I confess, to impress Demon Child, I took a photograph of Mr. Owen. I wore a new necklace and dress to my next babysitting session, and delighted in telling her I had a new boyfriend, and that he had given me the necklace and the dress that I was wearing now. And how good-looking was he? Hey, look at this photograph. Anyway, Molly was obviously sceptical, and she rolled her devilish eyes in her hideous head. And this is where I have to hang mine in shame, for I then produce my crowning glory, a selection of handwritten letters detailing several dates with Michael. The dates we'd been on, places that he wanted to take me, and how much he actually loved me. I even forged his signature. They were quite impressive forgeries. Michael went into quite a lot of detail. He said he liked the way I looked in my dress, and my hair all long and loose. And those earrings were cute, he said. Well, actually, I said, but like him. Naturally, this sealed the deal with Molly, and the wicked child was silenced. I didn't babysit her too often after that, which I'm quite glad of. So, here we go, collective. I prostrate myself at your feet to beg forgiveness, not from horrible Molly, but obviously from poor Michael Owen, who had absolutely no idea that I used his name, his image, and indeed forged his very signature, which I copied from a football magazine. He did not deserve to be used in such a way, and I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive my misdemeanor. I'm now happily married, but every time I see Michael on the telly, I'm reminded of my very bad behaviour. With hope and thanks, it's young Lucy. Very strange behaviour from everyone concerned. What do you think there, Sister Rebecca?
Well, it's a bit sad that Lucy let a 10-year-old girl get to her, but I can understand it in a way because 10-year-olds can be very cruel and they do know how to get your, the chink in your armour. So I think my mum says you're on the shelf. That's a classic one. So I think it's fair enough and I'm going to forgive.
Can you imagine being told that by a 10-year-old?
But also that you think the adult who's employing you thinks you're on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrible.
Sister Bobby from the Priory.
The thing is actually Molly wasn't that evil because her mum and dad must have been feeding her lines. The word spinster you probably don't know at 10 generally. True. And also it was my mum says you're on the shelf. So it's the mum and dad that I think are the real problem here. And she's only been direct and cheeky. You get forgiven though for making up the boyfriend, but did you really have to? But you get forgiven. No harm done. She didn't go to school and tell her friends that,
but
by the way...
She's got the eyes of an old witch and pointed teeth and ice fingers.
Well, that's probably not true.
Oh, yeah, you're probably right there. Yes. Oh, yes.
Probably
good
not
point.
true.
Good point. What do you think, Matt?
I love the best bit about this is the amount of detail that Michael Owen is going into about their dates when they were both on the date. This is what we did then. Then we went to the city. Yes, I remember, Michael. I was there as well. But he's still writing it down in all the letters. And at no point does Molly, the evil 10-year-old, twig onto that. So for that reason, I am definitely going to forgive. Because Molly should have picked up and didn't. Even though she's 10 and apparently evil.
Anyway, it's another Drive Time confession. Deadly's here.
Yeah.
Sister Rebecca's here. And we welcome into our collective for the first time Brother Mike Williams.
Thank you. Good to be here.
The younger brother
shoes.
of Matt Williams. You got red shoes?
I have, yeah.
So are you a naturally kind of forgiving person, by the way? Would you be hardline? Are you kind of like a posh socialist like Matt? Very, very kind of unforgiving of anyone who's like ever looked at a horse?
I'd like to think I'm the forgiving type, yeah.
So not at all like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see what happens with this. Tonight's story comes from Quentin, name withheld for probity reasons. Dear Father Simon and the team, my confession is probably one of the very few that will allow you to use the word euphonium.
Very good.
I think that's true, actually. I don't think we've had any euphonium-themed confessions. And this is without any reference to Soteri's dubious rendition of the floral dance, which... Was that, Daddy? Which marred the wonderfully sonorous sound of one of my old bands, namely the Brighouse and Rastrick brass band. So you're going to do that all the way through?
Well, I think you're going to play it, because I think you've got your arm in a position to play something, so...
No, actually,
right.
I'm not.
Okay.
Can you get me the Brighouse and Rastrick
Quickly.
brass band?
We don't need it, do we?
Just to stop him doing that. If I may, can I transport
Sorry,
you...
yeah, of course, yeah, please do.
Back to my days as a precocious 10-year-old, with quite a talent for playing the euphonium. A talent that saw me rise to the dizzying heights of principal euphonium with our local youth brass band, who are actually quite good, as they were from up north.
How many euphoniums would you get in a brass band?
Sounds like it's a good question.
Several?
Yeah,
What do you
you
think?
would. Yeah, they'd be grouped in the old French horn sort of area. So, yeah, I mean, you'd get...
You've got no idea.
Two or three.
Mike, do you know?
I don't know, no, but principal euphonium player is a pretty high accolade to reach at the age of 10.
It does sound pretty good, doesn't it? It might be...
Well, he could have been the only one, that's what I was asking. Anyway.
That's true. I think we're about to discover that there was at least more than one. Anyway, Quentin says, I have to set the scene briefly by explaining a bit about British brass bands. Most brass bands enter local and regional competitions aiming to play in the national finals for their particular section, a bit like football, but more manly. Anyway, the sections range from championship to fourth section, and there is also a youth section as well. My tale goes back to my second ever youth competition, and my first as principal euphonium, which involved a small solo and plenty of opportunity to show off to my proud parents who were eagerly anticipating my performance. My dad worked for a large... In fact, he says my dad at the time worked for a large excavator manufacturer. I imagine he means at the time he worked for...
Yes, indeed.
As opposed to a dad.
Yeah.
And he often brought home little odds and ends that would amuse his two boys. Amongst our most coveted prizes were the huge ball bearings that we used as dobbers when playing marbles.
Right.
We could smash anything with our huge metal dobbers, and playtime often ended with shards of smashed glass marbles and a very smug me. So to the point of the story, as I was preparing to go on to the contest stage, my good friend and second euphonium player...
So it's at least two. I might be right with three.
He asked to see my dobber. And then Quentin puts, no filth, please, Rebecca.
What?
That's
It's nothing to do with me. It's
come
never
on,
me.
come on.
actually
Always
written
Matthew.
in. Anyway, asked to see my dobber. By way of distraction and to calm his nerves, I obligingly showed him mine. It was 4 centimetres in diameter. And I started to think what I could do with this as we waited to go on stage.
Go on.
Looking at the it gets more challenging, that's all. Looking at the end of my euphonium, I thought it would be fun to roll the dobber up and down the tubing to make a funny noise. To my horror, the ball bearing slid quickly down the bell and came to a resounding stop. Where,
There is a gag there, isn't there?
There
But
is.
Don't, please don't.
where
Please don't,
two of
ladies
the
and
sections of brass tubing intersected beyond the U-bend at the bottom. My mate sniggered.
U-bend?
Yes. Are you familiar with the pipes of a euphonium?
As it happens, I am.
It does look like a lavatory. When you carry it around in the case, it looks like you're carrying a loo around.
I happen to
definitely.
be, yes.
Yeah.
I've worked with the central band of the RAF. I know
Okay.
what a euphonium looks like.
Right, so what we've done is we've followed the dobber there, and
Yeah.
it's gone beyond the U-bend, and it's now at the bottom of the bell end, presumably.
Of
My
course.
mate sniggered, and we thought it would be easy to dislodge, but to my utter dismay, it would not come free, and suddenly we were called on stage for our performance. The lumen blockage was so complete,
Yes.
I couldn't make a single note or squeak, and I had to hurriedly ask my second euphonium player to do the solo. He was also a good player, but a year younger, and obviously a bit less of a virtuoso, to be honest. Anyway, the euphonium section in our band sat within the other band, and it was not always clear to the conductor who was playing what. So on this contest day, I mimed absolutely everything, including my solo, which my mate played really well. No one could tell it wasn't me playing the solo. So my confession is not for miming along and deceiving the conductor. My confession is that the solo prize that day was won by the euphonium player from our band. In other words, me.
Oh.
Now, my mate had actually gone home straight after the contest.
So he didn't know.
Otherwise, I would have propelled him forward saying, "We're a team." But to my lasting shame, I walked up and took the trophy and the accolades from my tearfully proud parents. And my name will always be inscribed on the trophy as the winner that day. My only action of low-level valour was to give my mate the £20 book token which came with the trophy. And I sort of fudged over the fact it was my name on the trophy. Anyway, he quit playing by the following year, so he doesn't really care. So, Father Simon and the Exoneration and Damnation team, I ask your forgiveness for taking accolades under false pretences, deceiving my proud parents, and keeping this whole fiasco to myself for 40 years. By way of a postscript, I managed to remove the ball bearing just prior to our next performance when I whacked the euphonium with a well-placed heel of a nice semi-brogue, a shoe that belied my pretensions and saved my humiliation as the next concert featured but one euphonium player and one solo, yours truly, but no prize was offered or won on that day. Anyway, yours in humility, it's Quentin, who falls at the feet. Sister Rebecca's going to go first on this.
Why did they put the dobber in the euphonium in the first place? I don't get that.
I think it was. I think they were going to run it round and just sort of make a nice noise.
Oh, just as a joke.
As a joke.
Right,
Yeah.
practical joke. I think you kind of glossed over the fact that the friend quit playing after that. And I think that if the friend had known that he'd won the competition, he wouldn't have quit playing. I mean, this act of deception could have destroyed his entire career, his friend's entire potential career. So I think it's quite serious. I think he really should have fessed up to his friend. And so I'm not going to forgive.
Oh,
Well, let's see.
get you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Get
right.
you.
Deadly.
It was only a bit of fun, wasn't it? Dobber difficulties can occur at any old time, really. I think it would have been messy to have refused to take the prize because you'd have to do a lot of explaining in front of the audience. And you did give him the £20 voucher anyway, which was good. So yeah, I'm going to forgive. I think a little bit of fun, a little bit of nonsense. It all went a bit wrong, but it's not the end of the world.
No, well, that's very true.
I forgive.
Brother Mike, let's see how you make on this.
Well, there was more double entendre and innuendo there than a carry-on film in that confession, I think. And he did almost lose me at the beginning when he suggested the national finals were more manly than football, being here, representing sport today. I feel
Yeah, I
have
think
to
that's true.
Stick up a little bit for that, but I suppose, if he was just less hands-on with his dobber, it would have all been avoided. But the fact that he did give the £20 book token gift prize to his friend, I think I'm going to join Deadly and forgive.
Well, I'm delighted to say Brother Matthew is back
Hello.
from his, whatever it was he was doing.
Yes.
Deadly is here.
A very good evening.
Thank
to
you very much. And the Always reliable, Sister Rebecca.
you.
Thank you very much. And we're continuing the brass band theme, actually.
Yep.
We couldn't have enough of Deadly doing
Yesterday's euphonium-based story with
was a
the
cracker, that
4-centimetre dobber has clearly inspired Tony to step up with this. Dear Venerable Simon and the Order of Holy Helpers.
Okay.
My confession concerns an event which was at the very heart of the security of our nation and involves top-ranking military officers and gifted musicians and impressionable teenagers. Breaking news!
Wow.
Come back with me to the early 70s, at the height of the Cold War, when the pupils of a fairly ordinary state grammar school, which I attended, would spend every Friday afternoon engaged in activities to do with the Combined Cadet Force, the CCF. Some were in the army and spent time stripping down and reassembling weapons. Some were in the navy and learnt how to tie knots and identify enemy ships. And some were in the RAF and would do technical stuff with radar and the like. Everyone would have to do marching and drill as well as a bit of shooting on the school's own .22 rifle range behind the maths room.
.22, I think. Isn't it?
.22, sorry.
Yeah.
Is
No
that right?
cross country in there, was there at any chance?
It just sounds like your bog standard school, doesn't it, really?
Yes. Get out
I
your
wasn't...
.22.
Anyway.
Okay.
Tony says, I wasn't a great fan of any of those activities, but I was a member of the school brass band.
Oh.
Go on then.
Yeah, go.
And of the county brass band, which was at that time enjoying a great deal of success in national competitions. I managed to wangle it that I became the CCF bandmaster, which means badges, braid, promotion, and the opportunity to spend every Friday afternoon in the music room with a group of other like-minded beatniks. The highlight... What is a beatnik? Is that the same as a peacenik?
No,
Some kind of
Sort of hipster.
Yeah,
type
it is
person.
a bit hipster, isn't it?
Is that right?
It's a bit...
Oh, dear.
I don't wear socks in my shoes. Look at me.
It's a peacenik but louder.
Yeah. Society, take that.
Take that. Oh, right.
That was probably the campus voice I'd ever Anyway, the highlight of the CCF year was the general inspection, capital G, capital I, when some of the top brass from a regular regiment would come and have a look at what everyone was doing, check that everyone was suitably suspicious of those pesky Russians, and take the salute at the march past, which formed the climax of the whole day. This particular year, I think it must have been 1973, the year is very relevant, the whole CCF turned out for general inspection as usual, and the visiting majors and colonels and other senior figures wandered around feigning interest in the various demonstrations of Warcraft. The sun shone brightly and everyone's boots were highly polished and their brasses buffed to a mirror finish. Eventually the entire CCF lined up for the final march past. The officers stood on the school terrace cleared for the day of the mad maths master's Norton Commando and the PE teacher's rather flash Volvo coupe. With the band arrayed behind them. The opening drum beats rang out, the order to march was barked out, and as the first cadets set off, the band struck up even with John Philip Sousa's stirring tune, The Liberty Bell, which we had been practising in the secrecy of the music room for several weeks. Now, we played it rather well, I must admit, and some of the top brass turned round and smiled encouragingly at the performance of this fine tune. Unfortunately, the musically illiterate teenagers who made up the massed ranks of the young cadets knew the tune
As the
only...
theme from...
Oh, yes.
The theme from Monty Python's Flying Circus.
Yes.
And they were unable to hide their amusement, as rank upon rank of smirking, even giggling cadets passed in front of the saluting base. The top brass, who of course had probably never heard of television, never mind Monty Python, were at a complete loss as to why this was so funny for everybody. And of course, on TV, the music finishes with a finely honed and very loud raspberry. So it was that in solemn and dignified moment of the grand inspection, 400 boys and maybe quite a few teachers
Brilliant.
did this.
Oh, very good.
Thank you very much.
Very nice. That was
And then-
nice, that one.
Did you like that one?
Yeah. Stereo.
From then on, it was a stereo raspberry.
Yeah.
It took hours to record.
Brilliantly done.
From then on, the members of the band were the heroes of the Combined Cadet Force, and the teachers who provided the CCF officers within school always looked at us with a slightly bemused air. So, I would seek forgiveness for this unusual moment of hilarity from any of those officers who are still alive, although most of them seem barely alive even then, and also from the poor senior cadet who had to lead the march past while struggling to contain his own guffaws. I'm afraid our own CO got a bit of a dressing down for slack indisciplined troops. It was only intended to cheer people up a bit, subversive comedy, and in uniform too. Matt pretends to be a revolutionary whilst actually using a butter knife. This...
Hang on, how did I get...
This...
What?
Real revolutionaries do not use butter knives.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't.
For a fact,
What
yes,
sort?
they do.
Those in Enfield, I suppose.
Yes.
Anyway, Tony concludes, this was the real thing, brother. Anyway, there you go. So
Wow.
that's what he thinks
Yes,
of your revolutionary
excellent.
activities. Anyway, so the heart of a true revolution here, set off by Tony. A brass band confession, a little bit of Python going on in there. Sister Rebecca.
Well, I thought that was... Everyone found it very funny, didn't
Yes.
they? Apart from the people in charge who sound like they need a bit of a sense of humour injection.
They didn't know what was going on, didn't
I
they?
think, it cheered people up. It's definitely a great anecdote, great tale to tell. So you're completely forgiven.
Tony looking good. I think Deadly's going to
Yeah.
look kindly on this one.
Of course I am, yeah, because it's a good tune. It's their fault for picking that tune. It could be explained. It wasn't made up. There is that end to that particular piece of music. Everybody there did it. That was the point. No individuals could be singled out.
400 raspberries is a mighty big raspberry.
It's an indication that there's something not quite right.
Brother Matthew.
I'm definitely going to forgive here because
knife.
there is nothing more tiresome than someone who says, I don't think of the Monty Python theme when I hear that music. I think of whatever his name was. Or
John
it's
Philip
just-
Sousa.
Exactly, yeah. Or the same people who say, I always think of the William Tell Overture instead of Lone Ranger. No, you don't. You think of Lone Ranger, same as us. So I am definitely going to forgive for that because those kind of people are a waste of space.
Nicely argued.
They're the top brass. They're the top.
Here's tonight's tale. Comes from Kev. Thank you very much indeed, Kev, for tonight's tale. Dear Father Simon and the collective brethren, I think that after listening to your brave listeners confessing for many years, it is now time for me to rid myself of this black cloud, which has been hovering over me for 28 years. My tale of woe begins in a construction college that I attended in 1986, and initially I would like to thank you, Father Simon, as your Cockney twang will disguise the fact that the college was actually in Liverpool. Okay.
Oh, surely you're going to try a Scouse accent.
Maybe Matt could do it.
No.
It's an all-purpose, classless, regionless accent is what I... Anyway, it's in Liverpool, and I'm not going to try, all right?
Okay.
Do you think that's safe?
Give us your best Stevie Gerrard. Stevie Gerrard, go on.
No, I don't think so. You keep out of it. Anyway, I was in for the aforementioned construction college to learn my trade as a heating and ventilation engineer. And for those of your listeners who are not sure what a heating and ventilation engineer is, it's basically a plumber with a brain. Again, I realise that I'm alienating a small section of your listeners, but hey, they're only plumbers. I should say, actually, by the way, there's a lot of plumber abuse in this particular confession. I like plumbers. They do good work.
God bless the plumbers.
God bless the plumbers, and they're all underpaid. Anyway, me and my best friend Pat were a typical pair of sniggering, giggling teenage boys, and the mere mention of certain fittings, such as nipples or flanges, would start us giggling uncontrollably, and if I'm honest, still do to this day. And then he writes, different times, Matt. It's 1986, it was okay then. On this particular warm spring morning, me and Pat were paired together in an old house to do a very difficult assignment of piping up back-to-back radiators. This involved drilling two 25mm holes through a breeze block partition wall to allow the pipe to run through to feed each radiator. The first hole I drilled wasn't that straight and ended up, if I'm honest, more on a 45-degree angle through the wall. I heard from the other side of the wall Pat laughing, and he then proceeded to call me the most insulting name any young heating engineer could be called. I heard him snigger, "Hey Kev, you drill like a plumber." Well, how dare he, Father Simon? I threw the drill down and walked round the other side of the wall to see Pat laughing uncontrollably at what he thought was a hilarious comment. "OK, smarty pants, you drill the next one." Well, Pat agreed, and off he went to pick up the drill and started drilling the second hole. You can imagine my state of mind when, as per usual, Pat's hole was perfect. I heard Pat shout and snigger, "How's that then, plumber?" Well, I replied, "No, hasn't come through yet. Have a look." Anyway, now thinking I was pretty confident that Pat would just walk round and have a look and I could make some funny comeback line, something probably not suitable for a family show such as yours. But no, for some apparent reason, he decided to look through the 25mm hole he had just drilled. What? It's not that bad. Father Simon...
We're almost in video nasty territory
No,
now.
everybody's... Well, I was saying everyone's okay. No, they're not really. But anyway, Father Simon, I don't know what came over me. I have no excuse for what followed, but as I crouched down to look through the hole myself, I saw Pat's eye looking at me with the thought of the nasty abusive name he just called me fresh in my mind, I blew heartily into the newly drilled hole. Slightly relieved. Well, not even an above-average heating and ventilation engineer could predict the following sequence of events. If the scream wasn't enough, the crashing noise that followed still makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up today. The scene that greeted me wasn't as funny as a bit of dust in someone's eye. His head had disappeared into a cloud of concrete dust and the accumulated dirt of a century. Victorian filth everywhere. This was a dust bunny, a dirt devil of the highest order. Staggering back from the hole, he fell over my toolbox, which sent him crashing to the floor. Tools, screws, nipples and flanges all flew everywhere. It's 1986. Everyone spoke like that at different times. The sight of Pat flat on his back with a perfect circle of concrete dust around his left eye, if I'm honest, was pretty darn funny. By this time, our boss, Mr. Davis, had run into the area shouting, "What's going on?" One of Pat's hands had stopped rubbing his head and he pointed at me saying, "It was him! He blew down the hole!" "Me?" I protested sheepishly in my Liverpool accent.
Go on.
In fact, I was pretty sheepish as a certain I was as sheepish as a certain Radio 2 presenter admitting she'd never seen Mary Poppins, which, in desperation for forgiveness, I can confess I've never seen either. Anyway, I never did such a thing, I protested. I looked around whilst looking for some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card, and there it was. "It was the wind, sir. It was the wind coming through the window. It must have caused a gust of wind, and it blew down the hole." "Never mind, sir. Anyway, all that. What sort of an idiot would look through a hole he'd just drilled anyway?" Anyway, I was arguing this swiftly, changing the field of thought. Luckily, Mr. Davis agreed and told Pat to stop messing around and tidy up the mess that he'd caused. So, as any good, loyal and totally innocent friend would do, I went over and helped Pat clean up. By this time, Pat was feeling a bit guilty for accusing me in the first place, and I'm a true friend. He accused me of doing something as silly and immature as blowing down a newly drilled hole. What kind of an idiot does that? The guilt was probably felt even more from my side of things, as about 30 minutes later, he still couldn't see, and I drove him to the local eye hospital where he was sorted. Anyway, Father Simon, I'm not asking for forgiveness from Pat for deceiving him. Until this moment, he still thinks it was the wind. And besides that, as per usual, back then he was a very handsome young man, and whilst in the eye hospital getting his eye cleaned, it actually resulted in him getting a date with a very attractive nurse who was sorting him out. Nor am I asking forgiveness from Mr. Davis, who spent many an hour writing out reports and risk assessments, but I am asking forgiveness from the hundreds of heating and ventilation engineers who attended that construction college after me, many of which I've worked with and actually trained, who constantly complained of having to attend college and working in incredible heat. All training from this moment on had to be done with the windows closed. These sauna-like conditions were apparently all my fault. Yours faithfully, Kev, a plumber with a brain, is the way he signed that off. Anyway, I'm sure plumbers will want to have their say on that, but anyway. What do we think? Can we forgive Kev for blowing down the hole with the accumulated muck of a century going into his friend's face, causing him to go to hospital, Sister Rebecca?
Well, I can't believe his friend believed it was a gust of wind that went, in a very focused way through this hole, enough to dislodge years of dust into his eye. But he did believe it, so I think he's pretty gullible. His friend Kev didn't mean to nearly blind Pat, did he? So it was kind of unintentional. And also, he's on my side with Mary Poppins, so for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Fair enough. The novice, Nigel, yes.
Well, he did get his eyesight back, which was good, because I was worried about that for a moment, and he did meet a very nice nurse by the sounds of it, so that's all good news. But he should have been keeping an eye out for his mate, not trying to blind him in one eye. And if he didn't think about it for a minute, did he? He just blew it, and in every sense. So, Kev, you are not forgiven.
It's a comedy routine.
No, you're not forgiven because you were a plonker, even if you are a plumber who can drill, and I love plumbers.
Now, Brother Matthew, he's got a few things
Yes,
to say.
I was minded to forgive because he came up with so many sort of show references from me, from Rebecca, and didn't he? Well, he could have asked if Nigel had brought any beer in, and that would have been a whole trifecta there, wouldn't it? But it is a brave person who decides to criticise plumbers in the run-up to winter. And I, for one, what with a plumber coming around to look at my boiler on Monday, I'm a big fan of plumbers. I'd like to very much come down in the camp of the plumbers. So, for that reason, I'm not going to forgive.
Are you taking the day off on Monday?
No.
Because the plumber's coming around.
Are you waiting in?
Yeah. No, I'm sure he'll turn up on time,
all right.
as all plumbers do.
Well, they were this week's confessions. Chances are you've got one of your own. Come on, send it in now. No one will know. Confessions@bbc.co.uk. More in a week. and the Weekly Mayo available to download now and every Friday. Thank you so much.